Welcome to Styled Clean, from toxins to truth, one thread at a time, where we press pause on fast fashion and pull back the curtain on what's really stitched into our clothes. This is the podcast where we go behind the seams, follow the threads to their source, and rediscover fashion as an act of environmental stewardship. Hosted by Kathleen Audet, stylist and image consultant. This show is for people who believe their clothing is more than fabric. It's a living story that touches your spirit, your body, your mind, and your values. Styled Clean is where fashion meets stewardship. If you're ready to cultivate a wardrobe that honors your values and an ethical closet, you're in the right place. Now, let's unravel today's episode.
Josie Morris grew up on a family-run cattle ranch in Ohio where land stewardship wasn't a concept, it was daily life. Her family managed both registered and commercial cattle herds and sold grass-finished beef directly to their community. When they later moved to Oklahoma, they expanded the operation to include a large goat herd alongside the cattle. After earning a degree in animal science from the University of Arkansas, Josie returned to Oklahoma and now co-operates a working livestock operation with more than 2,000 sheep and goats, along with a stocker cattle enterprise. Her animals graze on leased pasture land and even industrial solar fields, places most people never imagine as part of a regenerative system. Josie's work is hands-on, it's practical, it's deeply connected to the land. She understands that healthy animals, healthy food, healthy fibers all start the same way. That's with soil that's cared for, not stripped or saturated with chemicals. The same land that grows our food also grows the cotton, flax, and the hemp that we wear. And Josie lives inside that reality every single day. I wanted to interview Josie not only because of her deep knowledge, but because of the joy and clarity she brings to her work. She reminds us that regeneration isn't abstract. It's built through daily decisions, it's built through patience and respect for the land that sustains us all. Here's the interview with Josie. Welcome to the program, Josie. Nice to have you.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for work in the regenerative space with the animals?
Yeah. So I think probably the easiest way to get you to where I am now is to tell you where I came from. I grew up in Ohio and we did Longhorns, Texas Longhorns, and grass-fed beef. And a lot of what we did would be considered like regenerative management. Rotational grazing is probably what we would have called it at the time, but we didn't really necessarily realize it or, market it as a regenerative thing. It was just, that's what we did because that seemed to make sense. And so then just before my senior year of high school, we all decided that we wanted to ranch on a bigger scale than was easily acquired in Ohio. And so we packed up and moved to the east side of Oklahoma. And there we started doing small ruminants, goats specifically. We had an area on the ranch that we had bought that was hyphens. And so containing
was
hyphens.
Hyphen, what's that meant?
And
What's that mean?
so it's a like wildlife fence. It's really tall. I think it's like 10 feet. And
Okay.
and it's like the grid. So they can't get out unless somebody cuts a hole in it. But for goats, making it inescapable is semi-complicated.
Because they can get out easily?
Yeah, they can jump over anything. They can slide under anything. They can jam themselves through the most ridiculously tiny spots. I have one named Blackie. He's all black, of course. And he's a bottle baby that I had from my senior year of high school. I still have him. And that boy will jump anything. He was on the interstate on 35 on multiple occasions. He's been removed from the property because he's a liability. And so now he lives in a petting zoo because he gets out so bad.
He's a troublemaker.
Oh, and that's That's the whole thing. The bottle babies are always bad. They're so sweet, but they
Hmm.
are rotten. Every single one of them cannot be contained. And they're just the best and the worst.
Hmm.
But yeah, so we had high fence, and so containing the goats wasn't really going to be an issue. And so we started off, we had never done goats or small ruminants before at all. And we bit off a big chunk of goats. We had a big herd to kind of start out with. And then we did cows as well there. And so growing up, my grandmother had boar goats, and we did that for 4-H. I showed meat goats, and I did not like them. I was like, these things smell, they're annoying. Like, it wasn't my thing. And so when we were in Oklahoma, I was like, Dad, are you sure you want to do goats? Like, I'm all for it if that's what you want to do, but I don't think I'm going to like it. And, it turns out I loved it. And so we had Spanish Kiko goats, which are we had some boar influence, but they're a little different. They're, a little hardier.
Hmm.
They can provide for themselves a little bit better. And, yeah, so fell in love with goats and then went off to college. And as soon as I graduated to college, I moved back to Oklahoma, a different area, but back, and, ran into a guy that had some sheep. And I was like, well, surely if he's got sheep and he likes that, I can talk him into getting goats too. And so we've kind of worked our way up, and we've got close to 2,000 combination of sheep and goats right now. And so we do mostly leased properties, and we will go graze for brush management is our focus and then sheep so we have meat sheep, and
Hmm.
so that is for more of a production side of things. The goats can be eaten too. I don't eat goats. I don't like it that much. But so yeah, the sheep are from a meat perspective, and then the goats we market to people that eat them too. But the regenerative side of that with the goats especially, I mean, they both serve a similar purpose,
Yeah.
but the goats specifically do a really good job of managing for brush encroachment.
What's that mean? Like they eat something different than the sheep, you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, so their diets are, they have some overlap, but primarily so for a goat, they want to eat, like, blackberries or greenbriers, kind of viney things or weeds, what people would typically consider weeds. That's what a goat prefers to eat, and sheep are more similar to cows in the fact that they'll choose grass first,
Mhm.
and then they'll browse on, the viney stuff if the trees or whatever, if they want to. So they kind of I would say they eat a similar thing in the opposite order. And so when it comes to like brush encroachment, a lot of the rangeland issues come from, just years of mismanagement or no management. Especially in Oklahoma, we have the cedar trees, so those
Yeah.
really scrubby, kind of
Mhm.
uncomfortable trees.
Mhm.
And that kind of cuts into the openness and the diversity in our rangelands. And so goats are really good at kind of mitigating that and then, like, even reducing that. So they'll kind of push it back out of our rangelands.
Okay. So in comparing like standard farming to regenerative, you're using the animals to graze the land and to eat what needs to be eaten rather than just go in with a some sort of a machine that I don't know what it is and just mow it down. Is
Yeah.
that what you're doing?
So at some point you could use just goats. You would have to be semi early into the game. Usually what we're doing is a combination of the two.
Mhm.
On the properties that people are bringing us in to manage brush, we don't do any of the tree clearing or anything like that. So they'll go in and clear the trees first, but usually if you have an environment where there's well-established trees, you've got quite a bit of underbrush
Yeah.
with that, and so we're like the cleanup crew. And so we come in and get the small stuff with the goats.
Okay. Okay. And do you graze the goats and the sheep at the same time?
You
You don't
definitely
let
can.
Yeah, or do you separate them so that they eat? I mean, you have to know about timing. Timing must be
Mm,
everything. When to let them in and what
uh,
time of the year and all that. Like that's
for sure. Yeah, so we
yeah.
have one herd right now that is both sheep and goats. In the winter, doesn't have as big of an impact because almost nothing is growing right now. But for our brush management, usually we only go in with goats, but that's really just set up that way because how our lease agreements fall. There wouldn't be a reason we couldn't do goats and sheep together because their diets are different, but there is some overlap. Having the two of them together actually creates this competition almost.
Mm.
And so it encourages them to get more of the things that maybe they would leave in with this idea of like, well, if I don't get it, the sheep are going to get it. And I don't know if that's exactly, I don't think it's a goat versus sheep thing, really. It's just
Mhm.
like, well, there's twice as many animals in here as before, and we eat kind of the same things. So if I don't get what I need, somebody else will.
Mhm.
And so that encourages just less selectiveness when it comes to the plants they eat, which gives you a more even kind of graze.
That's really cool. So if someone's hiring you to have your sheep and goats graze the land, what is their ultimate goal as to why they would do that? Why they would hire you to do that?
Um, so there's so many upsides to it, really. I would say most people come to us when it's the brush management point to kind of reclaim their land. And then there's also a big part of it that comes in with the soil health. Right. And so
Yeah.
having animals, especially just hoof impact itself, has a good influence on the soil. But eating, forages that are there and then returning what they don't use to the soil has like a great impact. Kind of biased towards the goats. Sheep do it just as well, I would say. But when you have a group of goats that come into an area to do brush management and then you come back the next year, the levels of green is just like wildly different.
Is
We're
that right?
going back to a property this year that we did, and we did, my gosh, there was just blackberries and greenbriers for days. It was just a jungle. And they did a lot of tree clearing too. And so this year, I'm so excited to see what it looks like this spring and to have the comparison. It'll just be like nutrient wise in the soil.
Yeah.
It will have made the plant life so different. Which, if you're doing brush management, like you're not gonna get rid of everything the first time, and so
Hmm.
this year, if it's a multi-year process. It's not like you have goats that come in one time and they eat all the briars and then you never have briars again, right? Because at the same time that you're getting rid of the briars, you're also making the soil really good, which is gonna encourage some growth. Ideally, when you get your soil back to, like, peak performance, there's more biodiversity, right? So there's more of an array of plants and it's not just greenbrier, but it's gonna be there. And so you kind of have to work with that and see how that falls throughout the years.
Hmm.
But it's a very cool process.
Yeah. So if you're a farmer and you've not done regenerative farming and then you decide to do it, you make that decision. There's a time period where you're going to go through. Is this Why is this so messy, or why does this look like
Mm.
this, or I'm used to the chemicals taking care of all of this. And so how do the farmers do when they decide to, I mean, from what you know, when they decide to change the way they're doing things to a more, say, healthy soil? Um,
That's kind of a tough one. I think a lot of that really depends on your context. So I would say probably for somebody whose entire livelihood is farming specifically, a lot of that implies plowing. That transition, I would assume, probably would need to be slower
mhm,
and maybe do kind of sections at a time instead of, a cold turkey kind of deal. Because,
yeah,
that will shock your system. If you've provided this aid for so long and then all of a sudden it's not there, your soil has lost the ability to kind of gather what it needs on its own in a certain aspect.
mm,
And so to just cut off a supply all at once, if they're capable of doing that, that would be really cool. It would be really hard.
yeah,
But if you're providing for your family with the yield that you get from your fields, then it's probably not reasonable to expect someone to do it all at once.
Okay.
When it comes to the ranching side of things, I think that transition, I don't know if I should say easier, but it's less aggressive, maybe, I would say.
Hmm.
Because really, and that can be a really smooth transition um, time wise. So, most of the time, conventional ranching is just you turn them out on the pasture that you have available. They stay there for 30, 60, 90, 100 days, and you wait until it looks like there's not grass, and then you move to the next spot that has some grass, and you just kind of do it that way. Or they just have free reign over the entire west side of the road, and then when the west side of the road looks rough, you put them back to the east side of the road. And to allow the key to regenerative ranching is allowing recovery for your plants.
Mm.
And so that's a lot easier to do if I would say 90%, maybe 99% of ranchers have some kind of divide like that's there from their fencing.
Oh,
And
okay.
so if it is just east and west, that's better than nothing. But if you're just closing gates, so if you have a smaller pasture that's 100 acres, instead of giving them the whole 500 acres, you let them have that 500. And then if the 400 is not split, you give them that. But you're allowing that rest time for the 100 acres. You're getting more regrowth in your plants. And that's really where the value comes from in regenerative grazing.
The value, talk to me about that. What is the value that you get?
So this could go multiple ways, but your soil health will improve. Your
Hmm.
forage quality will improve with. So when you're allowing that plant to recover, you're also, if you allow it to seed out, you're allowing that to come back. Some plants don't need to seed out, but allowing them, because a lot of times what'll happen is the same area is grazed the same time of year every year.
Hmm.
And so it kind of puts these plants in this cycle that they're never able to kind of reestablish. And so when you allow a plant to regrow and build up its energy and build a stronger root system, the root system is helping all of the life below the soil. And then your forage quality above the soil is going to improve some. There's obviously a curve to that, and you can only improve so much. And so I'm
Right.
not saying that if you let it grow all year that your forage quality is just going to continue to be better. But usually when we graze continuously, it doesn't get to stage 3. So there's like the initial growth stage of the plant is
Hmm.
plant
Yep.
1. Stage 2 is like the ideal kind of carbohydrate positive. And so when it's in phase 2, not only is it able to grow above, but it's also producing enough energy to produce roots below and having extra. And so a lot of times, and then stage 3 is the seeding out phase at the end of the life cycle when things start over again. We usually get to it in the spring right at stage 1, right? And so at stage 1, we're knocking it back. That's just the baby startup. It's got to
Hmm.
work really hard to get there. There is no reserves below. And so we're knocking it off at stage 1, and then you have to wait. Now you have to wait for the roots to reestablish before the things above ground can actually start growing again too. And so sometimes we hit it in phase 2, just depending on timing in the year, but sometimes we tend to never allow it to get to stage 3, or you hit the same area in stage 1 all of the time. It creates kind of this like negative effect, really, because you're never allowing your forage to get ahead. And so if your root system is never established, then you have way less going on in the soil below. You're just hitting yourself twice, really.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's fascinating that regenerative is such a big thing now when it seems like it's really been the way we should do things for forever. And I
Mm.
think it was done that way. It has been done that way in different countries. My question is that if this is technical maybe, but if you're talking about the root system being established and you're allowing it time, doesn't it seem like if you do that, the roots are going to have to go deeper in order to draw on some nutrients because they're being left alone. They're not being They're not having stuff poured into them or chemicals or even anything. Is that a thing? We can just take this part out, but I just am fascinated by the root system thing.
So, not necessarily, but yes, sometimes. So,
Mhm.
there are different types of roots depending on the type of plant you have. So, like those big Canadian thistles,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's a plant with a tap root. So, it has one really big root that goes very deep.
Okay.
And so, when we talk about diversity in plants, that's part of the upside to the diversity is different types of root systems. And so, see, this is a little deeper than
That's okay.
I'm
Yeah.
probably an expert at, but the best way to explain it is there are symbiotic relationships between the roots and between different types of plants. So some plants produce the nutrients that another plant will need,
Mhm.
and they share among themselves. And so part of it, maybe they need to go deeper, but also when you're improving the diversity of your plants, you're improving the microbiome in your soil. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that they have to go deeper. I think there's going to
Okay.
be a variety of plants that do go deeper,
Mhm.
but nutrient availability is going to be increased at the surface or just
Okay.
below the surface, right? At the top kind of levels there when you get to the point when you have enough plants to do all the jobs.
It's still pretty cool, and
It's
I'm
so
sure it
cool.
depends on rain and what if you're gonna even if that's gonna be withheld, then the roots would have to go deeper, but it's all part of a system
Hmm.
which we previously destroyed with, like, just plowing it up all the time, and I know for my husband and I, he's in the regenerative space now. He's in the regenerative space now, and when we're driving down the road, he notices, "Oh, that's regenerative, that's not, that's regenerative, that's not." And, it just looks messier. Like, it looks like it hasn't like, no one's taking care of it, but it's not overgrown to the point of, like, someone hasn't lived or done something on
Yeah.
it for years. But there is a mindset of, like, if this is what healthy looks like, I have to get used to that, right?
Yeah.
It's like your bottle-fed baby there when you were thinking about him when you were talking about, if you just cut off all of his supply and he doesn't get
Yeah.
what he wants, he's like a spoiled child, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so with the land, you kind of have to be like, listen, this is a big shift and it's not going to look the way you want it to when we do make the changes. I don't know. It's so cool. I'm just like, I mean, I know we've already talked about it, but I really wanted to ask you this question, which is like, why should consumers of clothing, why should we care about this regenerative process? Why is it a bigger deal than people? Why is it a big deal? It is a big deal. Why should we pay
Yeah.
attention? Right? Why should we pay attention? Yeah.
So I think when we talk about regenerative, sometimes I'm guilty of this too. We get really focused on ranching or farming specifically because we work so closely with the land that is usually the case. But you kind of have to look at it in a bigger picture because everything comes from the soil. And so even if you're not interested in buying lamb from me or ground beef from the neighbor. Like everything comes back to the soil. Everything has to start with a good base. And we've
Mhm.
got to this point where we've continually taken from this reserve and not put things back in a way that is helpful to the soil, because I'm sure when people think about it, like, well, we see farmers put fertilizer or herbicides or lime and things like that back into the soil. That's not the same as adding back to the soil in a way that is naturally bioavailable, put it that way. So we can put things back into the soil, but it maybe isn't actually all that helpful to the soil. It's more of just a band aid. And
Yeah.
so if you think about the regenerative side of things, is we are trying to utilize the land in a way that is beneficial to us but also the land so that we can continue to be ideally mutually beneficial to each other. And so this
Mhm.
ties into, you know, This ties into your milk. This ties into the leather that you wear. This ties into literally anything that you wear. You can trace it back to the soil. The soil is the
Mm.
foundation of our entire lives. And we've gotten to the point where we're so disconnected from nature that, if you want a new shirt, it just comes from the store.
Mhm.
And that is kind of the origin for a lot of people. It's like, well, okay, so maybe it came from the factory, but that has to stop being the idea of the starting point. Because if we forget where it's really coming from, it's not going to be something we can sustain. And so it matters because we rely on the soil for our entire lives.
We do. We do.
And
Yeah. And
the
sustainable, right? Like
Yeah,
sustainable, you're talking about that. You talk regenerative, but then you do need that sustainable aspect that continues in perpetuity. The land can continue to serve and care for us by what it produces, but we care for it the right way so that it's what's that, a mutually beneficial symbiosis or something. And
mhm,
that hasn't been the way it is. And we've lost that. Like, I think about clothing when I'm with clients and I talk about the fibers that are in the clothing, this it has this fiber and this fiber, or even if I say it's a polyester, like a lyocell or a rayon or whatever, there's not a lot of connection. They just are like, yeah, okay.
yeah,
But they don't know what I'm saying. They
right,
don't really know what I'm talking about unless they're really focused in on the fibers and they only want cotton and they only want wool. But that doesn't happen very often. So
right.
even when I was looking back over the last 25 years of working with clients, I realized they don't know what fibers are in their clothes. They just know, oh, does it feel okay against my skin at the moment? But are they asking anything more than that? And I think people are just starting to ask more than that, particularly when it comes to fibers that are made from oil or just polyesters. What happens over time, even if just an hour or 10 minutes or 2 days or a sweaty workout, what happens to
Mhm.
my skin and my body? We're just starting to recognize that more, right? It just happens. It was happening with my clients, but they weren't making that connection like you're talking about. It all matters. It all starts in the soil.
It really does. There's a quote. I think his name is Aldo. I can't remember his last name in the moment, but he says, like, when we start to see the soil not as a commodity that which belongs to us, but a community to which we belong, that's when
Mm,
things will improve. And
yeah.
I think we've spent such a long time in this mindset of what can I get,
Mhm.
that we've forgotten we're also responsible to be giving back.
Right. The
And I think
steward.
being a regenerative steward is important for everybody to at least be aware of. I'm not saying you need
Mhm.
to go out and start raising your own sheep, but supporting someone who's doing that is supporting the future for your children. You know, if we're not building anything, if we're not building a strong foundation for the next generation, they're going to have to do twice as much work to get it back where it needs to be. And
Mhm.
eventually, that's not possible.
Right.
And so,
Right. It can't come back. It won't
yeah.
come back. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the generational thing is important because you as a society and as a person, it's not all about us. It is about
Mhm.
what we're giving back and the future and making sure that what you what you do now affects what's going to happen in the future. Whether you want it to or not, it's going to. So just being aware that, oh, I need to pay attention to this, even if I don't go out and buy a farm, and which I'm not going to do. But the idea that it matters, it really does matter where your clothing comes from, where your food comes from. It was exciting to watch you move the animals from one place to another. We
Yeah.
got to do that. It was such a treat and such an honor to watch you work out there with the animals. And it was neat because they knew you
Mhm.
and you know them. And they, the dogs didn't bark at you. They only barked at us.
Yeah.
And those dogs are bred to be with those animals. And you could just see how happy they were.
Mhm.
My daughter is a dog trainer. And so I'm aware of dogs.
Yeah.
Just to see that breed so happy and so to fit in so well to that environment, it really did work well. And it was really fun to watch the difference between the sheep and the goats. There was a
Mhm.
big difference between the sheep and the goats.
Yeah.
And just to see how you moved them from one part of the land to the other was really cool. So thank you for letting us see that.
I love it. Like, I love when people wanna see what I do because I love what I do, and most of the time, there's not usually a lot of interest in sheep and goats other than the, "Oh, the babies are so cute," kind of
Mhm.
interest, which is great. I love that kind of interest too, but to see kind of what goes into it, because I think at some point, the idea was sold that regenerative is easier. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. In some aspects, it is easier because you're not working so hard against nature.
Mhm.
Part of it is true. But it takes a lot more observation and a lot more awareness about what you're doing. And so for people to come out and see that and appreciate that is super, like, it's so cool for people to, want to see what I'm doing because most of the time I'm just out there doing it.
Yeah, by yourself, by the
Yeah.
way, in
Yeah.
the dark with a headlamp.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah, I was very impressed. I was like, "You go, girl." The last question is this. It's that what's what's the one question that you wish every consumer would ask before buying
Mm.
clothes? Animal-based fibers,
Mhm.
plant-based fibers too.
I would probably say that the best thing to ask is, am I supporting someone who's supporting me? So if, you need to be buying someone who's investing in your future and your children's future in a way that applies to the land. And so I think that's probably a good scope to take.
I love that. Am I supporting someone who's supporting me?
And that could be, a wide array of things that could be implied, but specifically when it comes
Right?
to the soil, having
Yeah.
someone has your back is probably a pretty good place to start.
No, that's great. That's great. That's gonna be a thing. I'm gonna have that across a lot. I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Josie. Thanks for being with me. I so appreciate you. This week, I invite you to follow the thread, literally. Choose 3 pieces from your closet and read the fiber labels. Cotton, polyester, wool, blends. Ask yourself what those fibers required. What soil, what chemicals, what animals, what labor. You don't have to overhaul your wardrobe overnight. Just begin noticing, because stewardship starts with attention. If this episode resonated with you, follow or subscribe to Style Clean, because style isn't just what you wear, it's what you stand for.